Welcome to the Numbers Game Week 16 TNF Primer, the show where analytics meet the action and the data drives the decisions. I'm Cynthia Frelund, and together we'll dive deep into the stats that define this week's matchup between the Broncos and Chargers and uncover how the numbers make all the difference. It is not just about what happens, it's about why it happens and how the numbers help tell the story. What a fancy new intro. Let me know what you think about it. As always, the thing that does matter most to me is how grateful I am for you choosing to spend some of your time and energy with me. As we always do, let's have a look back before we move forward. Last week, my model went 14 wins and 2 losses straight up, 10-6 against the spread, and 7-9 on totals. That brings my season through 15 weeks with only 48 regular season games to go to 70.5% straight up, 52.9% against the spread, and 50.2% on totals. Moving on to TNF. Both the Broncos and Chargers are all but signed, sealed, and delivered into the postseason. In fact, if Denver wins, they are officially in. But both teams advance in no fewer than 82% of my simulations. Of course, both as wildcards. Now, seeding is a very big deal here because remember, 7 plays 2, 6 plays 3. So who's 2? Likely the Bills. Who's 3? Likely the winner of the AFC North, which would happen to be the Ravens. So this one's very interesting, although I will say, based on my outcome, the Chargers do end up in a specific spot. I'll tell you at the end. The total is 42 points, and the Chargers are field goal home favorites. In their first go-around, back in Week 6, where the Chargers prevailed 23-16, Bo Nix averaged his third most air yards per attempt at 10.7 on downfield passes. Remember, those are the ones intended to travel more than 10 air yards. He went 7-14 for 140 yards with 2 touchdowns and an interception on them. Looking at man versus zone splits, he was 1 of 5 for 2 yards with one of those touchdowns and an interception when the Chargers used man versus being 18 of 28 for 214 yards and the other touchdown versus zone. Pretty stark contrast here. Now, on the ground, we know that Bo Nix likes to scramble. In that game, he scrambled on 3 of 8 dropbacks when LA gave him man, where he earned 29 yards with 3 first downs. And against zone, pretty similar. He added 2 more first downs on 3 attempts, along with 32 more yards. In that game, his average time to throw was 3.78 seconds, which was the 9th longest of any quarterback in a game since Next Gen Stats started tracking in 2016. It follows that he faced a 49% pressure rate, which is his career high watermark. By the way, only 1/4 of those pressures were quick pressures. Those are the ones that happened in under 2.5 seconds. Since then, Bo Nix has not held on to the ball as long. Over his past 4 games, his average time to throw has been 2.77 seconds, and about 43% of his passes have been in sub 2.5 seconds. Not that quick passes mean success, but here it is perhaps a bit of a proxy for his comfort level increasing. And that is also a part of what drove their win last week, despite him throwing 3 picks. Nix's production against split safety coverages is a potential advantage for the Broncos should the Chargers stick with their trend of using these coverages on 55% of plays, which is the 2nd highest rate in the NFL. In Week 6, they down-throttled it to just 42%, and on those, Nix was 10 of 13 for 107 yards and a touchdown, compared with single high looks where he was 8 of 19 for 107 yards and a pick. As for LA's quarterback in Week 6, Justin Herbert used play action on a tied for season high 45% of dropbacks, completing just 8 of those 15 attempts for 49 yards. He also had his season low EPA at negative 7.2 on play action. The Broncos defense did not allow the Chargers pass catchers to get open when they used play action. Herbert was only able to target an open receiver on 3 of his 15 attempts. By the way, open to Next Gen Stats is defined as a receiver with at least 3 yards of separation. And 3 of 15, meaning having 3 open targets on 15 attempts, that is his season low. Overall this season, play action has been Herbert's go-to, using it on 32% of all dropbacks, good for the 3rd highest rate in the league, which means it's relevant to look at the Denver defensive season-long stats against it. They have allowed the 2nd lowest success rate and the lowest EPA against it at negative 21.3. The Broncos used man coverage on 53% of dropbacks in Week 6. That's their 2nd highest rate in a game this season. And remember, in that game, Patrick Surtain only played 1 snap. It was a forced incompletion. And in this game, he's trending towards playing, but it is not 100% as of this recording. For that whole game, Herbert was 9 of 20 for 123 yards and a touchdown with 6 incompletions and just 1 reception against tight coverage. We all know the Broncos blitz. Have you heard that somewhere before? All season long, I don't think their rate has dropped below 2nd highest at any point. But in that week 6 tilt, it was 61%. That is the 7th highest for any defense in a game this season. By the way, in it, they generated their 2nd highest rate of pressure off the blitz at over 47%. However, Justin Herbert had his season high in yards against the blitz at 136. Bottom line here, I think the wrong team is favored. My model has the Broncos with the win, splitting the season series with the Bolts, and stamping their ticket to the postseason, and the score 22-21. The Chargers have the type of injuries, offensive line, Ladd McConkey, Justin Herbert, that aren't necessarily keeping guys sidelined, but it is hard to argue that they're playing close enough to 100%. We do know J.K. Dobbins is on IR, and since he's been gone, the run game has been more challenging. I know the game script wasn't great for the run game last week, but they had 32 total rushing yards against the Bucs. Since week 13, 0 of their players who have attempted a run on first down, so the quarterback and running backs, have earned positive rushing yards over expected, and no one is averaging more than 3.9 yards on that first down, which means setting up the rest of the drive to show us a little bit more of the context in that it relied so much more heavily on passes. Which brings us to our TNF menu. Last week, George Kittle's yards hitting more than 57.5 were a lone bright spot in an otherwise sleepy, slow night. Although we did get the winner, which was an upset, the total. We got a lot of things right, just not these props. Let's start with our bland ingredients first. Remember, these are props that happen in at least 55% of my simulations. Number 1, Gus Edwards to rush for more than 35.5 yards. He will not be appearing on my weekly top 25 running back list. That's the one I put out on Wednesdays. But it is more than that extremely low number. He will rush for more than 35.5 yards. Number 2, Marvin Mims to earn more than 26.5 receiving yards. Mims has the 2nd highest deep route rate in the NFL at 32%. He got loose for a 93-yard touchdown in week 13, which I'm not saying happens here with a very high probability at all, but I am saying that deep routes help forecast for him to exceed 26.5 total yards. Number 3, Stone Smart to stay under 36.5 receiving yards. I know tight end is one of the better places to target this Broncos defense. However, both of these teams are near the top of the league in plays where 0 tight ends are on the field. The Chargers do it the 3rd most often, and just for good measure, the Broncos rank 5th. On to the spicy ingredients. These happen in at least 48% of simulations, but have the kind of volatility that make the juice worth the squeeze. Too bland and a spicy is a normal amount of risk. 2 spices and a bland is my preference, so mix and match as you like. Number 1. This might be my favorite one for the entire game. Bo Nix to rush for more than 21.5 yards. I have him for 27 or more in 48% of simulations. Number 2, Ladd McConkey to have more than 64.5 receiving yards. Ladd has lined up in the slot on over 65% of snaps, and he's earned the 2nd most yards from there at 550, along with the most receiving yards over expected at 141. I also have the game script dictating more passes later in the game. Number 3, more than 42 points. But Sin, you said at the beginning, your season-long situation is just barely over 50%. So are you sure about that? I hate it, but I spent way too much time this week looking into what is up with me on totals this year. So in order to get better, I am digging in. In this case, both defenses are great. The Broncos are the best by win share on the entire season. Looking at recent form, so over the past 4 games, it shows that both teams are having a tough time running the football. More passes means more possessions, means more potential for errors as well. You see how this all starts to flow. 2 quick notes before we go. Number 1, be on the lookout for a special guest episode. We have to get this college football playoff situation figured out. What's the menu? What are we looking for here? There's so many more things that we need to talk about as we get a full month of college football that actually matters, not just random bowl games and a few good ones. This is fantastic. So I have asked one of my friends who's one of the smartest football minds around. He is a literal PhD, football analytics, gaming. He does great stuff for March Madness. You're going to get to know him too because he is awesome. We'll have a little chat about the college football playoffs for this specific show, though. And second, we have a winner. We have named the AI segment, which I will tell you in the full episode. I will see you back here for that full episode with the rest of the week's games in a day or so. And of course, projections, scores, and more are ready for you to use as you wish on Wednesday, the 18th. Remember, they change daily with the injury report and news. Thank you so much for hanging out. And if you like the show, please subscribe, and pass it along so we can continue to grow.